Part 181. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1806. Grand Duke Rimmer froze on the spot, his eyes chasing the magic carpet as it fell into the hospital, and then chasing the figures of the magicians flying across the sky and into the distance. Obviously he is the most important guest, and he is obviously the person that Oak Grove Hospital should receive wholeheartedly tonight. However, in the entire hospital, there were busy mothers and mothers who were busy going out to save people, and no one cared about him. In fact, no one was waiting to receive him. Grand Duke Rimmer wanted to be angry, but for some reason, he felt a little unable to be angry. He was walking hurriedly behind him, and at some point, a group of people had followed him. Grand Duke Rimmer did not look back. Just by the heat, heartbeat, and blood flow of the visitor, he knew it was the group of travelers who came with him. In other words, they are the patients among the group of travelers who have high status and come here specifically to seek medical treatment. The Orc General said angrily. That's it? The healers have all run away? What about us? No one cares about us anymore. Maybe we are not in a hurry. Another footsteps almost as heavy as his came over. It was a barbarian witch doctor. He was taller than everyone present, and the sound of his footsteps was heavier than anyone else. After all, we have traveled such a long way and waited for such a long time. Nothing will happen if we wait another night, but those people are going to die without anyone to save them. A bunch of untouchables are dead, another Orc General, maybe a prince, the Grand Duke didn't care, muttered. The Grand Duke wanted to nod, but before that, he had heard a firm and powerful voice. I don't think so. Regardless of their status, they are all human beings, just like us. I am willing to wait to save their lives. The voice was old and firm, that of the old knight brought from Saxony. Human beings always have some inexplicable persistence. The Grand Duke of the blood race wanted to snort coldly, but also felt a little emotional. Is this why humans, led by the Golden Lion of Saxony, have been able to fight against them for so many years? Because they always have some inexplicable persistence, because there are always some people who are willing to value the lives of untouchables. That's because you are a human, the Orc General said angrily. Humans always turn towards humans. Humph. Don't be like this, don't be like this. The old human healer came out to stop the fight. Looking at the best, they don't care about the difference between nobles and untouchables, and rush to save people when they see someone dying. Does that mean that in their eyes, life is the most important? That's right. Next to him, the former Sister of Radiance and a middle-aged female healer said with a smile. They would be so busy saving others, instead of putting everything aside and busy receiving me, then when they treat me, they shouldn't treat me differently just because I'm from there, right? This sentence made everyone nod. The differences in status are endless. If you want to divide people into 3, 6, or 9 grades, you can always distinguish them. If a healer dislikes the fact that the workers in the steel factory are poor, the pregnant women in the slums are poor, the wealthy businessmen are not noble enough, and the low-level magicians cannot afford to pay. Then, of course, he could despise barbarians for being dirty and smelly, despise orcs for being barbaric, and despise vampires for being dead. As for those who dislike the people who came from the glory holy sea, they are even more justified. Who doesn't have a blood feud with them? Such disgust comes and goes, and in the end, perhaps only the noble top spellcasters and top nobles will not be discriminated against. However, the people at the top did not benefit much from this. On the contrary, they also suffered huge losses. Therapy is an empirical discipline, and mature therapists are accumulated through sufficient cases and extensive training. If a therapist discriminates against others, then he must have lost too much experience and knowledge. Such a healer cannot grow strong enough to serve top spellcasters and great nobles. In particular, The new treatment technique proposed by Master Nordmark is based on understanding the structure of the human body. The healer needs to have sufficient experience. Thinking of this, Grand Duke Rimmer actually felt that his faint unhappiness had faded away, and he even looked forward to the future experience. Well, maybe, here, you can get better treatment, or at least you won't be looked at with vague contempt and vague fear. With this thought in mind, Grand Duke Rimmer actually slowed down and did not rush into the hospital to see what was going on, or to receive immediate treatment. When following the guide into the hospital, he even moved lightly and followed the instructions to walk beside him. SHHH, this is the emergency passage. Let's make a way for critically ill patients and rescuers to come out. This circle is a teleportation point. Don't walk into it or block the way. Don't grab it, this is a blood bag. Wasn't there a maternal hemorrhage just now? Waiting for blood to save life. Blood bag. Grand Duke Rimmel's eyes immediately lit up. Blood, plenty of blood, cold blood. Just as it passed over his head, there was a swish and he smelled it. It was blood that had a completely different smell from that in their territory. Why does blood taste like this? Oh, now the mother is waiting for help. Every drop of blood is precious. After saving the life, isn't it convenient for us to have a bag to try? Although the blood does not have strong magical power, nor does it have the fascinating spiritual fragrance of a highly qualified pure girl, but it is different. Grand Duke Rimmer followed the team forward curiously. The closer we get to the rescue room, the noisy exclamations and shouts inside become clearer. Okay, the baby is out. Fortunately, it was delivered in time. Then we wait for the placenta to be delivered and the bleeding to stop, and then everything will be fine. That's the secret. The secret is up. Work harder. It's quick. Don't stop the treatment. Don't stop the blood transfusion. Can the hematopoiesis be stopped for a while? The mother is so thin and severely malnourished. I'm afraid she won't be able to hold on. The placenta, hasn't the placenta been delivered yet? Uterine contractions are weak. The placenta cannot be exfoliated naturally and may need to be exfoliated artificially. Change hands. I'll do it. Angelina, pay attention to my movements. Wherever I peel off, your treatment will follow. Stop the bleeding. You must stop it. Grand Duke Rimmer could smell the bloody smell in the emergency room without twitching his nose. Good guy, how much blood did this cost? Half a person? One person? There isn't that much blood in one person's whole body. Such a strong smell of blood must be the blood of at least two people. Such a severe hemorrhage can be cured. In other words, the Nordmark Mages Oak Grove Hospital will try to save it, that is to say, they think it is possible to save it. Fun, fun. He quietly took a few steps forward, hoping to see more clearly. In the emergency room, the orderly busyness suddenly turned into exclamations, mixed with an unusually rapid and shrill sound of beep, 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 beep. Maternal chest tightness. I can't breathe. The mother's heart has stopped. Compressions. CPR, quick. Prepare for defibrillation. No. It still doesn't work. The blood oxygen keeps dropping. Don't stop treating fatal injuries. No, I don't have enough magic. Annie, go get all the healers. Quick. There are not enough healers. There are a group of seriously injured patients tonight, and we need to reserve enough healing skills for them. Contact MSX Laban. Please support the baby-friendly medical center. Nature Order, God of War Temple, Spring Water Temple. Contact Dragon Island. Contact Master Nordmark and ask for guidance. Nordmark Mage may not be online. Run, shout, direct, ask. Finally, all the chaos ended with a sharp shout. Nordmark Mage is online. Grand Duke Rimmer quietly took 2 steps forward. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1807. Grand Duke Rimmer thought that with his level and agility, he would be the first to step into the rescue room, as long as he wanted to. However, reality gave him a blow. Just as he took a step, a whirlwind blew behind him, and a figure in white rushed in impatiently, shouting as he rushed. "I'm a healer too. How can I help? Stand back. Stake to the wall. Be careful of infection." In the emergency room, the first thing that came out was this scolding. Sister Guangming rushed into the emergency room and leaned against the wall. She pricked up her ears and listened to the surgeon in front of the operating table asking, "Can you treat fatal injuries? How many can you put in?" "Yes. 2. I can also put 5 more cure serious injuries. Just treat fatal injuries. Let go. Put it back. Get out. Isn't it, burning bridges like this, once the 2 cure fatal wounds are used up, it will be of no use to them, so just drive them away." Grand Duke Rimmer burst into laughter. He looked at the Sister of Radiance who had released 2 cure fatal wounds in a very short period of time, making herself pale from exhaustion. She was dripping with sweat and walked out unsteadily, and looked at another priest striding in. "I'll take over. I can put 5 in. Okay. Listen to my command. Let go. Put. Put." With the help that came unexpectedly, the patient survived for a while longer. Finally, there were noisy footsteps in the corridor, and 2 magicians rushed in pushing a strange-looking thing. "It's here, Master Nordmark is here dash." "What, here we are." Grand Duke Rimmer turned aside during his busy schedule. What rushed past him was something that looked a bit like a tower and a bit like a cabinet. It made a sizzling sound and had 4 wheels attached to it. It made a sound as it rushed. "Don't worry, what's going on?" "Maternal hemorrhage," beside the surgeon, a girl began to report anxiously. "We had an emergency cesarean section and took out the baby. The uterus was weak and we had to manually remove the placenta. Halfway through the removal, the mother's heart stopped. She has been pressed down now, but her condition is getting worse dash." "So is this a remote call?" "The Magic Council's remote calls have reached this point." "Can they make direct calls even though they are thousands of miles apart?" "Oh, no, it's not a direct call, because there's a human image on that thing. Keep pressing, don't stop. Let me see her situation." Turn around and face the surveillance light curtain. Grand Duke Rimmer turned into a streak of black smoke, ducked into the emergency room, and found a place out of the way to stand against the wall. As soon as he stood up, he quickly floated up again, an inch above the ground. "Good guy." The blood flowed to his feet. On the operating table, probably under the mother's body, blood flowed down like a waterfall. Several healers who were busy around the pregnant woman stepped directly into the bloody water with their feet, making a sound of water when they stepped on it, and a sound of water when they stepped on it. The mother's arms were spread out, and near her elbows, 2 light green, translucent tubes were hanging high at the same time. In the pipe, blood gurgled, dyeing the pipe almost black. On the trolley next to the operating table, a small platform was filled with empty blood bags. Beside the cart, a healer was guarding, taking off the blood bag from the basket that flew into the room along the wire, and connecting it to a translucent tube. Then take off the empty blood bags from the other end of the tubes and put them neatly on the cart. Tisk, how much blood was used? But so much blood is still not enough. Maybe it's not entirely the blood problem, but it's just not enough. Grand Duke Rimmer didn't even need to twitch his nose, he could feel it instinctively. The mother's aura is weakening, not quickly, but irreversibly. If the treatment hadn't been done one by one at all costs, I'm afraid she would have died. "Do you still need to save me? No matter how much it costs, do we have to save him?" Grand Duke Rimmer watched with interest. The mother was just an ordinary poor woman, her body was abnormally thin, and her body was covered with traces of years of torture. He doesn't have any great qualifications, which he can tell just by smelling the blood. The spells that were thrown on her body, calculated according to the universal charging standards, it is estimated that she will not be able to repay it in 10 lifetimes. But they were still trying to find a way to save her. The Nordmark mage, with his team, the Grand Duke remembered that this was the wording in the paper, was trying their best to save her. The blood pressure is so low, the Nordmark mage said in the light curtain. What about tissue hypoxia? Look at her lips, look at her fingernails and other areas. Is there any obvious sign of cyanosis? Yes. Damn it. He cursed quietly, speaking faster and faster. Although Grand Duke Rimmer didn't know what the mage Nordmark was scolding, he could probably guess that the mother's condition was very bad, so bad that it might be beyond his ability to handle. What about coagulation? How about coagulation? Look at the coagulation. Immediately, a healer jumped down and almost got under the mother to take a look. Soon, a crying voice came from under the operating table. Poor clotting. She's bleeding. She keeps bleeding. Mage Nordmark cursed something again, his voice low and vague. Grand Duke Rimmer floated forward a little with interest, and his voice suddenly became louder. Blood transfusion. Speed up blood transfusion. Open venous access. 2 are not enough. 4 limbs. Add central venous access. As soon as possible. Pressure blood transfusion. Pressure blood transfusion. I taught you this. Can't operate? Use your hands. Use your hands. The natural priest gives up control and does his best to maintain the strength of the blood transfusion channels. Check the ventilator. Keep the airway open. Give adequate oxygen. Encouragement technique. Encouragement technique. Don't target the heart specifically. Apply it to the whole body. And soothing technique, target the lungs, she is likely to have pulmonary vasospasm. Bronchial smooth muscle spasm. Accelerate blood. Accelerate blood. The current blood volume is not enough. Prepare for me. The Grand Duke clearly saw that the Nordmark mage in the light screen also gritted his teeth, and then said an extremely astonishing number. 60,000 milliliters. 60,000. 60,000. We don't even have enough blood donors. Go call someone. Go call someone quickly. There was an exclamation. Gretel's heart couldn't stop sinking. After the cesarean section, he suffered sudden cardiac arrest, hypotension, chest tightness, difficulty breathing, tissue hypoxia, cyanosis, and coagulation dysfunction. Adding all the symptoms together, he could think of the most dangerous clinical situation in obstetrics. Known as the #1 obstetric killer, the probability of happening is 1 in 10,000. Amniotic fluid embolism. How can I save this thing? Even if I were at the scene, there was a high probability that I wouldn't be able to save this thing, let alone thousands of miles away now. Hey, Master Nordmark, do you want to give her a lot of blood transfusion? Suddenly there was a flash in front of the light screen, and a black shadow floated over and stuck out half of its head. Is there anything I can do to help? We vampires are the best at playing with blood. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1808. Greet's heart couldn't stop sinking. Amniotic fluid embolism, such a rare disease and such a high difficulty in rescuing, means that in some small hospitals, obstetricians and gynecologists may never see it in their lifetime. Even if you are lucky enough to see it, you probably don't recognize it. Maybe all you know is that the mother suddenly died after giving birth for some reason. In larger hospitals, even if they are seen and judged, the difficulty of rescue is extremely high. It's so high that if you encounter such a case, even if the rescue fails, you can still publish a paper summarizing the lessons of the failed rescue. Of course, if the rescue is successful, you should feel proud and publish a paper to show off that our hospital saved a sheep plug. One person survived the rescue, and the director of the obstetrics and gynecology department who presided over the rescue. Yes, as long as the chief director was in time, he would probably be called to the rescue. He could boast for the rest of his life. Able to boast proudly among local doctors and at various academic conferences, and receive looks of surprise, admiration from colleagues. I can play in front of students from generation to generation, and I can continue to play for 10 years after I retire. The reason for this is that the onset of amniotic fluid embolism is extremely sudden, the condition is very dangerous, and the condition is extremely complicated. The so-called amniotic fluid embolism, as the name suggests, means that amniotic fluid is squeezed into the maternal blood vessels and enters the maternal blood circulation during uterine contractions. You must know that the amniotic fluid during and after delivery is not clear and free of any impurities. This amniotic fluid is mixed with vernix, meconium, epithelial cells shed by the fetus, fetal hair. Okay, these things enter the originally clean blood. What happens then? The heart pumps blood very quickly. It only takes 20 seconds for the blood to circulate throughout the body, which is equivalent to the contents of the amniotic fluid reaching all parts of the body within 20 seconds. As a result, the blood vessels, the platelets in the blood vessels, and various coagulation substances all detected foreign objects and began to call the police frantically. There is something wrong. Something is wrong. Something is wrong. Generally speaking, if something wrong like this is detected, it means that the body is injured or has a wound, and foreign matter will invade. Therefore, the coagulation function in the body begins to fully activate and increase power, triggering the coagulation cascade reaction. Coagulation. Coagulation. Seal the wound. Block all these wounds. Well, blood starts to clot everywhere you can imagine, in the blood vessels, in the heart, in the brain, in the lungs. Blood coagulates into tiny thrombi, which is what makes people laugh. Disseminated intravascular coagulation, DIC. Small blood clots turn into large blood clots, blocking the heart, resulting in myocardial infarction, blocking the brain, causing cerebral infarction, blocking the lungs, pulmonary embolism. This is a famous term that is not as big as myocardial infarction or cerebral infarction, but it is more likely to die than a cerebral infarction. It's a disease that's just as quick as a stem. Of course, if other organs are blocked, it will also cause other organs to be unable to supply blood, leading to failure and death. Then, because the coagulation factors are consumed in large quantities, it will lead to a systemic bleeding tendency, and the wound will be even more unable to stop bleeding. And the mother's uterus, where the placenta had detached, was bleeding. Massive bleeding. At least, it was a massive bleeding of more than 150 milliliters per minute. At this time, a large amount of foreign substances enter the pulmonary blood vessels, which can also cause allergic reactions, leading to airway edema. At the same time, pulmonary hypertension prevents the heart from pumping blood into the lungs. Active substances in the blood vessels cause pulmonary blood vessels to spasm. Without blood supply to the lungs, there is no strength to breathe, and the result of lack of strength to breathe is respiratory failure. The next step of respiratory failure is left heart failure, hypotension, shock. At the same time, the inflammatory substances in the amniotic fluid are still stimulating inflammatory reactions in every corner of the body. Thinking about this situation makes me shudder. As a doctor, you have to deal with heart failure, respiratory failure, pulmonary hypertension, allergies, systemic inflammatory reactions, Dick. Each of these will cause people to die on the spot in a short period of time. At the same time, doctors are still trying their best to squeeze the brain and make differential diagnoses with other diseases. Heart failure, shortness of breath, pulmonary embolism, air embolism, myocardial infarction, arrhythmia, peripartum cardiomyopathy, aortic dissection, cerebral infarction or cerebral hemorrhage, allergic reaction, transfusion reaction. Blood transfusion may also cause DIC, anesthesia complications, uterine rupture, eclampsia. Come on, 1 minute at the latest, please make sure to judge, otherwise the rescue will be delayed. Therefore, in Greet's previous life, he admired the chief director of the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, who had retired when he was promoted to deputy director. During Greet's internship, a classmate of hers was lucky enough to save a case of sheep thrombi with her. Even though that classmate was only responsible for using a creaking method to clean blood, when talking about the rescue, his eyebrows could still fly to the ceiling. It never stopped during those hours. It never stopped. The kidneys were lined up in a row. The dexamethasone was pushed in one by one. Not to mention the blood used. The classmate put down his chopsticks and patted his chest, abdomen, and armpits. Here, 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 the blood is boiling. My body temperature has dropped by 2 degrees. Yes, blood is needed during rescue, a lot of blood. Clinically, when rescuing patients with sheep thrombus, in addition to supportive treatments such as anti-allergy, relieving blood vessel and airway spasm, anti-shock, and correcting a series of respiratory failure problems caused by acidosis and alkalosis, there is only one principle. Rush with blood. Rush with lots of blood. Flushes away amniotic fluid, flushes away microthrombi, flushes away various inflammatory factors, brings fresh, healthy blood to all parts of the human body, and brings normal and sufficient coagulation factors. Clatter, crash, crash. The upper part is flushing, and the lower part is bleeding crazily. Where is the bleeding point? Where is the bleeding point? I don't know, I can't find it at all. The whole uterus and the entire abdominal cavity are filled with blood. You can't even see the incision clearly. The head of the surgeon and the retractor are covered in blood. To fight allergies, use motivational techniques instead of epinephrine. To relieve spasm of blood vessels and airways, use soothing techniques. To fight shock and solve other problems, use high-level treatments. As for those amniotic fluids, those inflammatory factors, and those blood clots, here's someone who knows how to remove poison, Greet snapped. Immediately, someone stood in front of him, a white robe all stained red, with blood dripping down. Greet had no time to recognize people and spoke very fast. This happens to pregnant women. It is most likely caused by amniotic fluid entering the blood and forming tiny blood clots throughout the body. You know about blood clots, right? Nod, nod, nod vigorously. Gretel continued to speak faster. You define the amniotic fluid, all the substances in the amniotic fluid, vernix, meconium, fetal cells, everything, as toxins. Thrombi are also defined as toxins. Then, release a remove toxin shot on the mother. The blood robe therapist's eyes were a little straight, his lips moved, and he turned back like a log with his heels as the axis, as if he was desperately trying to convince himself and modify his cognition. Then, a clean, slightly aqua blue light shot out from his hand and caressed the whole body of the mother. Soon, again and again. How about it? The mother's condition is not improving. The coagulation function has not improved. No. I can't do it. The blood-robed mage almost cried. Gretel raised his voice. Can anyone do it? Anyone. Maybe after a lot of advanced education, changing perceptions, and sufficient preparation, Someone can follow Greet's request and release a remove toxicity, amniotic fluid, and thrombosis version. However, among the healers in the hospital now, it is obvious that no one can do it in a short time, at least, no one can release the spell according to Gretel's request within 5 minutes. Gretel closed his eyes regretfully and continued to think of a solution quickly. Washed with a lot of blood, it's just helplessness in helplessness. If possible, it is best to use crystalloid and colloid instead of blood to avoid disseminated intravascular coagulation, DIC. Receiving a large amount of external blood transfusion can easily cause a transfusion reaction, and DIC is an extremely dangerous type of transfusion reaction. What else can be done? Is there any other way to save people? Hey, Mage Nordmark, you seem to have encountered a problem, I heard it just now. Do you want to remove all the dirt in the blood? Grand Duke Rimmer took another step forward. What a great opportunity. Selling him a favor at this time can make him work extra hard to treat me. At worst, future medical expenses can be severely discounted. Gretel's eyes turned sharply to him. The phrase "our vampires are best at playing with blood" floated through his mind, and his eyes lit up. You can do it? Ah, we don't usually do that, but it's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geoland 2020. Chapter 1809. But what? In the light curtain, Greet leaned forward slightly, speaking urgently, and it could even be said that his attitude was not very good. Grand Duke Rimmer couldn't help but narrowed his eyes. Interesting, really interesting. He had a feeling that the Nordmark mage across from him was anxious not because of seeing him, but because of the mother being rescued on the operating table. And this mage's attitude, it can be said that it is not very good, but he is trying to restrain himself. He also tried hard to restrain himself for the sake of the mother, and did not curse him. Grand Duke Rimmel, who was used to others being respectful and fearful of him, felt a little strange when faced with this situation. With this slowly rippling mood, he smiled. However, we can have the means to drain all the blood at once. How about it? Do you need it? Gretel narrowed his eyes. A vampire, a high-level vampire at the level of a Grand Duke, claimed that he could drain the human body's blood instantly, and Greet believed it. But is it too late to drain all the blood and pour in new blood? How long does it take for new blood to spread all over the body? How long can the heart, lungs, and other organs endure ischemia? The heart seems to be able to withstand 20 to 30 minutes of ischemia, the brain seems to be able to withstand only 4 to 6 minutes, the cerebellum 10 to 15 minutes, the medulla oblongata 20 to 25 minutes. The kidneys can last for 30 minutes, the liver about 1 to 2 hours, and the lungs can last a little longer because oxygen can diffuse a little from the alveoli. However, if all the blood is drained at once, it is not an ischemia like insufficient blood supply. At least there is still a little bit of ischemia. Or, even if the heart stops, there is still residual oxygen dissolved in the blood. Drain the blood and there will be nothing left. Can you make sure that you only drain the blood? You don't drain the cell fluid and tissue fluid together? That would be too harmful to the human body and could kill you directly. I can control it. Grand Duke Rimmer's hair stood up a little, which was called frizzy hair for short. This kind of mistake of completely draining the blood without leaving a drop of water would only be made by novice vampires, those below the Viscount level, and he is already a Grand Duke. If you want to pump the heart, pump the lungs, and pump the left kidney, there is no way to pump the right kidney. That's great. Gretel sighed. What happens after it's drained? Can you fill it in with new blood at once just like draining it? I've never tried this before. The Grand Duke pondered. Draining blood is a means of fighting, replenishing blood. What is replenishing blood for? Torturing the other person? If the vampire is interested in someone, they will give them true blood and let them survive on their own. If it is a person who is completely worthless, just let him die. There is no point in replenishing blood. However, in principle, it may be possible to replenish blood in one go. Give him some time and research, maybe he can figure it out. If you can't do it all at once, what about accelerating blood replenishment? Looking at his expression, Greed knew that he was not sure of getting it all at once. But it doesn't matter, you can still settle for the next best thing. How far can you accelerate the flow of blood and allow fresh blood to flow into the human body quickly? How many minutes will it take you to inject fresh blood into the human body and fill the entire human body? The Grand Duke pondered again. He has never tried this, but instinct can tell him the answer. The only problem is that he has old arms and legs, and he is not used to using the unit of measurement of minutes. Let him think about it, let him think about it. About 20 breaths. 20 breaths for a normal person, he estimated with some uncertainty. Alas, it's so shameful. There is no corresponding spell. It is really inconvenient to rely only on natural instinct. If there is a spell, he can really fill up his blood in an instant. 20 breaths is enough. Gretel's eyes lit up like never before. The respiratory rate of a normal person is about 12 to 20 times per minute, which means that the whole body can be filled in 1 minute to 1.5 minutes. Even the brain is not suffering from ischemia and hypoxia to the point of necrosis. Very good. Then it's up to you, Greed said loudly. Opposite the light curtain, he bowed deeply and immediately began to give orders. Prepare blood. How much blood is there in the operating room now? Minus 2000 ml? Not enough. Bring 4000 ml first and get it ready. Don't stop motivating or comforting. How is the situation now? Blood pressure 88/50ths, heart rate 122, respiration 25. Very good. Continue. Don't stop the detoxification technique, keep doing it. Maybe you'll be able to do it sometime. Blood pH? Too acidic. Don't stop the detoxification technique. Correct the acid-base balance. Thank God, these magicians have good imaginations. After accepting that blood that is too acidic and too alkaline can be harmful to the human body, they can also use detoxification to correct the acid-base balance. Otherwise, respiratory failure will lead to acidosis, and sodium bicarbonate will be infused to correct it, and an intravenous input line will be occupied. Various spells are used in a multi-pronged manner to provide supportive treatment, and the effect is obviously good. At the very least, the maternal blood pressure has risen somewhat, and spontaneous breathing and spontaneous heart rate have recovered. Of course, the bleeding has not stopped yet, and we are not out of danger yet, but isn't this being dealt with? Grand Duke, please take a look first at the input channel for maternal blood transfusion. Greed turned to the Grand Duke of the vampire race seriously. Do you want to replenish blood from the veins of the limbs, the central vein, or through magical means? Direct penetration. Magic means, Grand Duke Rimmer replied without thinking. How could magic be such an inconvenient thing? You need to find the blood vessel first, puncture it, and then drip blood into it bit by bit. His spell can directly let blood penetrate into a person's body. That's great, Gretel praised with a smile. Then he raised his voice. Everyone's attention. Everyone's attention. Don't stop the magic treatment team. The blood transfusion team is preparing blood. Except for the one currently being transfused, stack it separately. Well, how much does the mother weigh? Less than 50 kilograms, someone immediately answered urgently. Before delivery, the baby's weight was less than 50 kilograms. The baby's weight was 2,437 grams. Pregnancy to term, less than 50 kilograms. In other words, her weight before pregnancy may have been less than 80 pounds, this is an extremely weak and malnourished figure. It's really hard for her to make it to term. It's really hard to believe that she is still alive and the baby still weighs nearly 5 kilograms. Gretel didn't have time to sigh, and immediately calculated in his mind, after taking out the baby and draining the amniotic fluid, the mother's weight was probably only 80 kilograms, and even including edema, it was probably less than 85 kilograms. Then, the blood volume in the body is about 7% to 8%. Stacking 3500 ml. I count 3, 2, 1, and the blood transfusion treatment begins. Healing spell preparation. Within 1.5 minutes, 2 consecutive treat fatal wounds were cast, with the purpose of maintaining vital signs. In addition, after the blood transfusion is completed, a separate person will release treat fatal wounds to part of the mother's uterus in order to stop bleeding and heal the wound. Need to be able to locate the wound. The healers moved and took their positions according to Gretel's request. Grand Duke Rimmer strode forward and stood next to the mother's head. After everyone nodded, Gretel coughed and took a long breath. Everyone prepare. Everyone prepare. 3, 2, 1. Then, through the screen, he saw a blood mist that he had never seen before, emitting from the maternal cervical pulse and filling the whole room. Blood all over his body, more than 3000 ml of blood, surged out in an instant, 1 second at the shortest and 2 seconds at the longest. This is a larger blood column than a carotid artery rupture or aortic rupture. In an instant, all the dirty blood, including amniotic fluid, blood clots, excess cells caused by the inflammatory storm white blood cells, T cells, various immune cells, and more than 200 types of human cytokines all left the body. Greet only held his breath for a moment, and the blood mist had already converged, condensed, and poured onto the ground. Immediately afterwards, the 7 blood bags arranged separately next to each other, each bag containing 500 ml, exploded one by one at a speed of 10 seconds, bang, bang, bang. It exploded into blood mist, seeping into the body from all directions from the mother's head, limbs, and torso. Greet stared closely at the surveillance spell and saw the blood pressure on the light screen rising rapidly, 50 20ths, 60 35ths, 70 40ths. Thank God, thank God. The speed of replenishing blood is fast enough, and the speed of blood pressure rising is fast enough. As long as clean, safe blood can arrive in time, and the coagulation factors carried in the blood can cooperate with the treatment to stop the mother's bleeding in time, maybe. Can patients really make it through? Thank you, His Excellency the Grand Duke. After the inspection is completed, please come to Long Island. I have many things I want to talk to you about. Thanks to Sun Walk for the 1000 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1810. The busy night is finally over. After a major blood transfusion was performed throughout the body and the bleeding was stopped, the mother's condition gradually improved. Although the stimulation, comfort, and detoxification techniques cannot be stopped, the treat fatal wounds that maintains vital signs can be slowly reduced. Until the healing spells were no longer needed and other supportive spells slowly stopped, the mother was still alive and her vital signs became more and more stable. Everyone could finally be sure that the mother had overcome this difficulty. Gretel took a long breath and waved his hand. Please record today's rescue process and form it into a written form. The mother will stay under observation and closely observe the situation at least until she fully recovers and can walk out of the hospital on her own. During this period, try to gain weight as much as possible, alas. Yes, sir. Understood, sir. Send the rescue records to me this afternoon. If everything goes well, tomorrow. Greet calculated in his mind that the time difference between where he is and Nevis is about 6 hours. I will give you a lecture at 3 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. Yes. Yes. The answers came in mixed voices, ranging from tiredness to despair. It had been a long night of hard work. One night? He was running, urging, and casting spells again. His energy was exhausted and he wanted to fall asleep. I also need to record the rescue process and write it down. It will be passed on this afternoon. Help, the blood on my body hasn't been washed yet, it's all turned into scabs. However, there were also people whose eyes were shining. Even if they were extremely tired, they could not stop them from being full of energy. They almost jumped up and threw themselves into the light curtain. Master Nordmark is going to give a lecture. After successfully rescuing an extremely rare critical case, Master Nordmark will give a lecture. It's great, there is new knowledge to learn, and maybe new spell models. Mage Nordmark is already level 18, and he may become a legend when he returns from Dragon Island. In the future, there will be fewer and fewer opportunities to give lectures to them. These lectures will be missed every time. We need to go back and sort out the rescue records as soon as possible. While sorting it out, you also have to think carefully and form your own opinions so that you can ask questions when the time comes. For example, what is the cause of this dangerous situation? For example, why is Master Nordmark commanding such a rescue? For example, what should you pay attention to when encountering this kind of situation in the future? Work when you need to work, catch up on sleep when you need to, and clean up the mess when you need to. At 3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day, Greet came online on time and lectured everyone remotely. Hello everyone. We encountered a very dangerous case early yesterday morning, or the night before yesterday. According to my speculation, this disease should be a condition called amniotic fluid embolism. He talked from causes to pathophysiology, from clinical manifestations to diagnosis and identification, from treatment methods to prevention, thanks to obstetrics and gynecology for the entire section. In the entire classroom, 50 or 60 healers, including spellcasters who came from the baby-friendly medical clinic, Babel Tower, and Spring Water Temple, were so crowded that the aisles between the tables couldn't be squeezed sideways. Past. Grand Duke Rimmer simply floated to the ceiling. Looking left and right, he saw that there were several healers ready to move, but he was worried that it might block other people's sight and not let the tables and chairs float up together. After Greet finished speaking, a nun from the Spring Temple couldn't wait to raise her hand. You just said that amniotic fluid embolism is difficult to predict beforehand. Does that mean that even the most distinguished nobles may encounter such dangers during childbirth? Yes. It's very unpredictable. Gretel barely restrained himself from sighing. No matter how noble your status is, no matter how much money you have, no matter how sufficient preparation you have in advance, you can't say that you can prevent sheep's blood clots. This piece of shit is the god of death's roll call. Then, those noble people we serve, those people who had better not get into trouble. Mammy's voice became smaller and smaller. Over the years, even the Queen's multiple childbirths were taken care of by the Spring Water Temple. If you encounter amniotic fluid embolism, if there is not a strong enough healer around, or even, if you are not lucky enough to have a vampire Grand Duke present. However, based on its principle, some high-risk factors can still be prevented. Greet continued. Amniotic fluid embolism is ultimately caused by excessive pressure in the amniotic cavity and destruction of the maternal-fetal barrier, causing the amniotic fluid to press into the ruptured maternal blood vessels, so older primiparous women, multiple births, placenta previa, caesarean section, induction of labor, emergency labor, uterine contractions are too strong. He counted them one by one, and the expressions of the people listening to the class below became increasingly grim. The Queen, and many noble ladies, could not escape multiple births. For placenta previa, it depends on your fate, but for caesarean section, mothers who can afford the care of a therapist are used to it. And mothers who practice martial arts sometimes inevitably encounter problems such as emergency labor and excessive uterine contractions. So, are the risks they face actually higher than those of women who endure pain and struggle to give birth naturally? Of course, knowing the principle, We can also try to prevent it from a magical level. Gretel suddenly raised his voice. In the final analysis, it is the amniotic fluid leaking into the mother's body. We can try to weave a magic net to cover the uterus, or at least block the external blood vessel nodes, so that the amniotic fluid will not be pressed in or filtered out. This method was unavailable in the previous life. The uterus, through the placenta, the amniotic fluid, and the baby, was constantly exchanging oxygen and nutrients, which blocked the uterine blood vessels and caused death in minutes. However, in this world, magic can be an invisible and immaterial force. Maybe you can give it a try. Maybe it can be done. Maybe, you can give it a try. Our spring water temple already has a spell to cleanse the water. Maybe we can try to cleanse the blood. The magicians and priests were whispering to each other. Gretel raised his voice. Of course, with this method, you must be careful not to trigger coagulation of coagulation substances. Don't let platelets or anything like that hit the filter, and then blood clots start to form. This could kill someone. Yes, Your Excellency. I understand, Your Excellency. We will try it immediately. Gretel waved to them from the other side of the light curtain. Remember to do animal experiments first. Use rabbits, use large animals, try it step by step. Don't do it on people first. When it comes to controlling water flow and blood, the combined efforts of so many people should be much stronger than him alone. I hope they can do it in Nevis while I am far away on Dragon Island. Even if the incidence rate is low, even if the spells are expensive, one preventive shot for each of those high-risk patients with high status may not be the best, but it can save lives if used. After Greet gave the order, people were naturally divided into groups and paired up to discuss ideas and study plans. Gretel himself smiled at Grand Duke Remer. Your Majesty the Grand Duke, let's talk. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1811. I've watched your film. For remote communication in the reception room, Gretel got straight to the point. The first sentence caught the entire attention of Grand Duke Remer. The symptoms are not very typical. There are some characteristics that I have never seen before, and there are some phenomena that cannot be explained by my current knowledge system. Of course, I admit that I have not studied the treatment of vampires before. Grand Duke Remer nodded without surprise. Living people and undead creatures, living people and vampires, naturally have different physiological characteristics. It would be strange if this Nordmark mage could tell what kind of disease he had and how to treat it at a glance. That was bragging, and he couldn't believe it. Of course, I don't have much dealings with vampires, and I have never diagnosed or treated vampires. I am not familiar with the physiological characteristics of noble races. Master Nordmark was still talking with a smile, and his gentle and courteous attitude was very useful to the Grand Duke. Look, this is the attitude of good communication. Like those guys from the glorious Holy See, their nostrils are turned upward, full of contempt, and they hide their weariness and fear under their contempt. Who wants to talk to them? You look down on the vampires, the noble vampires, and they look down on you. This Nordmark mage is very good. In his eyes, the vampire race, which is one of the various races in the world, is not more powerful than the dragon race, nor is it older and more elegant than the elves. At this point, the vampires are still self-aware. In this case, wouldn't it be nice for everyone to have a good chat, a good talk, and a good treatment? If Master Nordmark needs anything, he is willing to help as long as he can. Is it convenient for you to come to Longdeo? I think that to answer your questions, some interviews and examinations may be needed. Then, you have to ensure my safety in front of the Dragon Clan. No problem, Gretel quickly raised a large piece of paper. I have talked with the dragon clan. As long as you abide by the above code of conduct, do not pry into the dragon clan's secrets, and do not cause harm to Dragon Island and its creatures, the dragon clan will ensure your safety. Let me take a look. Hey, the third, fourth, and fifth items above are too harsh. War of words, war of words. The two parties talked for a full hour about the Blood Clan's code of conduct on Dragon Island and the supply of the Wizard Tower to the Grand Duke, and finally reached an agreement. As soon as the light curtain went out, Gretel immediately jumped up. Leon! Leon! Quick! Sort out all the blood-related research projects we listed before. Don't miss any of them. Then notify the corresponding mage and the corresponding school. Let them sort out the necessary research conditions and prepare the necessary research resources. I finally found someone to do the work. Yes. Teacher, Leon Carlos also jumped up quickly. I'll notify you. Let them sort out the list within one day, and we will definitely catch the nearest airship from the Parliament. Gretel has coveted the vampire's abilities for a long time. There is no way. There are many places in clinical practice where the ability to control blood is needed. For example, we can treat myocardial infarction, we can treat cerebral infarction, we can treat pulmonary embolism, we can treat blood clots from nowhere. Of course, physical thrombectomy is indeed useful. Under the guidance of CT, find a natural priest with a careful enough heart, steady hands, and strong spatial imagination to spawn an extremely thin vine, enter the blood vessel, and swallow the blood clot. This is of course possible, but the premise is that first, enhanced CT also takes time. Even if enhanced CT is not used, scanning with mental power still takes time. Second, cultivating natural pastures also takes time. Although in theory, a level 1 nature priest can spawn vines, the mental power must be delicate and stable enough, and even level 5 may not be enough. For a town the size of Heartland City to be able to produce 2 nature priests above level 5, Elder Irwin has put all his efforts into taking root. However, counting the 5 or 6 small towns around Heartland City, there are 10 or 8 level 5 nature priests, and it may not be possible to cultivate one. Considering the high incidence of cardiovascular and cerebrovascular diseases, Greed hopes to prepare at least one alternative. And the first person he targeted was the necromancer. The 5-ring necromancy spell Thalassemia can make the target's blood as thin as sea water. In Greed's plan, it is the first weapon to deal with excessive blood viscosity, excessive blood coagulation, and thrombus. However, this spell has 2 major shortcomings. First, this spell is a ranged spell, it covers the whole body of the subject without missing a beat. Therefore, the blood instantly becomes thinner, and the result is that the blood's ability to carry oxygen and nutrients is greatly reduced, and the organs throughout the body are instantly starved of oxygen. If blood is not transfused quickly, the work will fail in minutes. Second, the ability of this spell to deal with blood clots is still not enough. Greed once tried to use it to treat coagulated blood clots. Unfortunately, other blood became thinner and it only dissolved a little. Greed hopes that it can be fired at a fixed point, focusing on a small area of thrombus formation, or that it can sweep away a large number of microthrombi without affecting normal blood. However, he has been studying this topic for several years, and none of the necromancers from the 9th to 5th rings have successfully studied it. Maybe they are too busy. Greed thought, a little annoyed. Well now, a vampire Grand Duke has arrived on Dragon Island, and his project has finally been taken up by someone. It is instinct for vampires to play with blood. As long as Grand Duke Rimmel can find a way out, he can transform this spell from an instinctive spell into a spell model, and then modify it step by step from the spell model to meet the standards he wants. When the time comes, if there is a myocardial infarction, cast a spell and dissolve the thrombosis on the spot. Cerebral infarction, cast a spell, thrombolysis. No matter where the obstruction is, a spell is thrown over and the blood flow is opened on the spot. Also, isn't the Grand Duke good at controlling blood? Treatment of cerebral hemorrhage can indeed stop the bleeding, but occasionally the coagulation may be excessive and form a thrombus. Then you don't have to worry about using too much force in the treatment. One treatment will stop the bleeding and heal the blood vessels, and then another thrombolysis will dissolve the thrombosis. Perfect. Gretel was in high spirits, rubbing his hands as he walked from his study to the basement, walked back and forth on the 2 floors occupied by the necromancy system, and then ran to the floor occupied by the control system. By the way, 10 of the 10 vampires are masters of charm. Let them cooperate with the charm control system to do more experiments. What are the hormones that cause various emotional reactions in humans? They are extracted one by one and can be synthesized artificially. In the future, obstetrics and gynecology can accelerate uterine contractions and promote uterine hemostasis, so there is no need to just treat them. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Giolan 2020. Chapter 1812. There are some nodules in your lungs, they are not at the level of tumors, but it is best to remove them. This is easy. Just make a hole in the chest and it can be cut immediately. You have high blood pressure, high blood lipids, and high blood sugar. Let me think about what to do. Gretel poked his temples with the quill pen and rubbed them. First of all, of course, it is to adjust your living habits. With your blood pressure so high, you can still move without any hindrance. Do you really deserve to be a high-level warrior? You have a herniated disc, spinal stenosis, or scoliosis. Do you often feel pain in your waist and legs? Do you feel that the saddle area is still a little numb when riding a horse? I want to think about how to smooth it out if you have surgery. Move your bones. 11 patients, all except the magician who came with the team and the vampire count who ran errands to serve the Grand Duke, were sitting neatly outside the consulting room, waiting for their number to be called. In view of the high diagnosis and treatment fees, as well as the even higher fees for film reading and data transmission, Greet met with them one by one through the long-distance image transmission of the Master Tower to discuss their condition and diagnosis and treatment plan. Most of them can be cured in Nevis. For example, the one that needs a nodule cut, just make a small incision in the chest and let the natural priest insert the vines. Take the glorious nun, for example. Her main problem is uterine fibroids, and her main request is to learn the most advanced obstetrics and gynecology techniques. Then, her journey can end in Nevis, and she can further her studies at Oak Grove Hospital. For example, those with intervertebral disc herniation and scoliosis. Thanks to the medical development over the years, the Temple of the God of War has made tireless efforts in this regard. Of course, whether the old knight from the Saxony territory is willing to accept treatment from the Temple of the God of War is another question. Considering that if he does not receive treatment from the Temple of the God of War, he will have to pay a large amount of additional treatment fees and travel expenses to go to Dragon Island to meet the Nordmark mage. He may have to struggle painfully between faith and money for a long time. But some people must come to Dragon Island, and they can only come to Dragon Island. For example, an old witch doctor in the wilderness had multiple metastases of tumors. The healers in Nevis were not sure how to deal with this, so they had to ask Gretel to take action himself. Another example is the Grand Duke of Rimmer. Nevis has done a series of tests, but his condition is still not certain. The only option is to ask him to travel thousands of miles to Longdeo for a face-to-face consultation and serve as a research tool and instrument. Well, the echo in this area is very messy, showing a mixture of low echo, medium echo, and high echo. However, if it is judged to be a tumor, the CT should show uneven density, but there is no such thing on the CT. When Grand Duke Rimmer heard this, he felt dizzy and his head was buzzing. He couldn't hear a word of what Greet muttered next, about magnetic resonance, low signal, high signal, enhancement, etc. Let's be honest, what is going on? How to treat it? What do you want me to do? I really don't know about this. Gretel looked at him with a wry smile. And there's another problem, traditional therapy, the reason why it's called therapy, uses positive energy to guide cells to divide quickly and tissues to grow quickly. But for vampires, positive energy will cause harm to us. Grand Duke Rimmel nodded heavily. We can resist relatively weak positive energy, but that doesn't mean there's no harm, it's just that we can neutralize it with the negative energy in our body. And blindly condensing negative energy, like a necromancer summoning skeletons, directly soaking our bodies with negative energy will not work, and it will also make us feel uncomfortable. He raised his head and looked out at the slightly golden moon through the wide floor-to-ceiling windows of the Mage Tower. Lower vampires make a living by sucking blood, but for upper vampires, what helps us the most is actually the moonlight. We absorb energy from the moonlight to advance ourselves and repair our bodies. Many of our spells also rely on it. The Grand Duke tilted his face slightly, and the moonlight shone on his black hair, his pale cheeks, and his pale lips, adding a touch of melancholy to this handsome man. He stretched out his hand, and the moonlight suddenly became rich, forming a small silver waterfall that fell into his palm. This scene was just perfect for a painting, but Greet's reaction was to jump up immediately. Moonlight. Moonlight. What kind of energy is moonlight? Ask them to check the literature, call it the plastic energy department, call it the alchemy department, ask the necromancy department to send people over, measure the light waves, study the energy properties, and allocate the energy in a targeted manner. The Grand Duke was momentarily speechless. He stretched out his hand and grabbed it, then squeezed it, and shaped the waterfall of moonlight into a small silver ball, put it on the table, and pushed it towards Greet. This is my greeting gift. Your people want to study moonlight, so it will be more convenient to take this. But, if you don't understand moonlight research, then you can't cure it. The research doesn't understand. If we have to cut open your body, we may not be able to help you heal. Gretel smiled bitterly. Of course, for areas where there are doubts, we can do a needle biopsy, that is, insert a long needle into it and take out some cells for observation. However, the operation may need to wait for a while. It doesn't matter. You are responsible for cutting, and I am responsible for self-healing, Grand Duke Rimmel insisted. Greet shook his head vigorously. When it comes to surgery, you may need anesthesia, which means you may need to cooperate with the surgery unconsciously. By then, you won't be able to heal on your own. Even when unconscious, the vampire's true blood will not be sprayed randomly like humans, Grand Duke Rimmel insisted. Just cut it. However, even if it can be confirmed that your cause is tumor, current cell-killing techniques may not be effective on you. Greet looked sincere and embarrassed. It's not that I don't work hard enough, or that I'm not sincere enough, it's just that the vampires are too troublesome. The nature of energy, the basic underlying logic, and various situations are all different from humans. Then you can study it slowly. The Grand Duke sighed unhappily. By the way, how long will it take you to get the results? You can't keep me here for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, or 8 years, right? This damn place is so uncomfortable. There is a legendary dragon next to it. From the moment I got off the airship, he stared at me with his strange eyes wide open. I really can't stand it anymore. Well, there is a welcome banquet tonight. Gretel looked around and said. Can kill a high-level monster, has blood rich in magical power. Thanks to Mao Jing for the 100 starting coins. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Lan 2020. Chapter 1813. Blood. Hot blood rich in magic. From high-level Warcraft. Of course, the local mage tower may intercept some of it and use it as casting materials, ink for transcribing magic scrolls, or, according to the Nordmark mage, fill it with blood sausage or something. However, a huge high-level monster can draw out more than 60 liters of blood. As for the Grand Duke Reamer, he is more accustomed to tasting blood slowly with a goblet. How much blood can a goblet hold at one time? 300 ml? 200 ml? In particular, it is absolutely impossible for an elegant high-level vampire to fill the goblet. They fill up to about a third of the cup, raise the cup and slosh slowly, letting the blood hang on the wall of the cup and fully mix with the air, so as to enjoy the sweet fragrance of blood. Grand Duke Rimmer was happy to enjoy the taste of blood, especially since it was for free. There is no need for him to fight by himself, no need for him to hunt by himself, and no need for his descendants and subordinates to hunt. There is no need to pay anything, there is fresh blood to drink. Therefore, under Gretel's invitation, he finally agreed to stay. There must be a clean place for me to live in. The place must be open, the sun must be covered tightly, and it must be convenient for me to bask in the moon. No problem. Just call the alchemist here and the house will be built today. However, I can't control whether the dragon clan wants to stare at you or not. There must be fresh monster blood to drink regularly. No problem. As long as you kill the monster, the blood will be left for you. All treatment fees must be waived. Well, I can make the decision to waive my own treatment costs. However, if other spellcasters are used during this period, I cannot deduct their labor, or can you negotiate with them yourself and cooperate with their research in exchange? Also, I don't like to work during the day, it must be at night to match your research time. But magicians have to sleep at night, otherwise, we can build a dark spell corridor from your residence to the magician's tower, and you can open it when you come over, so you don't feel like you're in the sun. Is it a question of whether or not to get some sun? It's a question of me not wanting to get up during the day. In any case, the two sides reached an agreement. The Grand Duke of Rimmer happily took out the coffin, silk-embroidered quilt, wool tapestry, velvet curtains. Soft decoration has been arranged in the castle built specifically for him. Looking at the appearance, it seems that he will live there for 10 or 8 years. At the same time, the magicians of the plasticity department set up instruments, the alchemists were eager to help, and the necromancers pulled out everything from microscopes to microelectron microscopes. Bloodlines. High-level vampires. It is a rare opportunity to study the flesh and blood of high-level vampires, even if it is just a small piece, slice it into thin slices and look at it under a microscope. Yes, study of flesh and blood. At the dinner that day, Grand Duke Rimmer raised a glass of Warcraft blood, gestured to greet from afar, and drank it in one gulp. At 9 o'clock in the evening, under Greet's guidance, he lay down on the operating table. I can't see clearly what it is in the magic image, it would be best to do a puncture biopsy, take some cell samples, and observe them under a microscope. The Grand Duke agreed with this explanation. In any case, it was better than cutting open his body and carving out a piece of flesh from the suspicious area. However, when Gretel asked him to take off his pants, he firmly refused. You want to go in from the back? That's not possible. However, the area suspected of having abnormal signals is in your intestines. Gretel tried to reason with him. Entering through the natural entrance of the human body is the least harmful way to the human body. That's not okay. It's beneath my dignity. Just stab it in the stomach. Stab it from here. But your body is injured. I am a vampire. I don't care about this. Just drink a few more mouthfuls of blood and sunbathe under the moon for a few more days and that's it. Grand Duke Rimmel turned over resolutely, pressed his back tightly against the operating bed, and patted his belly. Right here. Just poke here. Question: what should I do if the patient is extremely uncooperative, has extremely poor compliance, and is unable to receive treatment after treatment? He replied, nothing to do, just listen to him anyway, the possibility of blood bacterial infection is extremely low, and the self-healing ability is extremely strong. Even if the internal organs are punctured, there will not be much danger. What? Puncture a blood vessel? As a vampire, if you can't control every drop of blood in your body, then what kind of vampire are you? Even if I poke here, you still have to wait for me to perform an ultrasound positioning. Where's your mental power? You're tickling me. No, ultrasound can also make you feel itchy. Is it really not a psychological effect? Chirping and noisy, but not slow at all. Grand Duke Rimmer let go of some control of his power, allowing the vines created by Gretel to penetrate under his skin and swim deep into his abdomen, while still complaining. Do you have to wrap it around slowly with a vine? Can't you use a long needle, just poke it in the end, and then take it out? The damage to the vines is relatively small. For example, now, the vines can go around the intestines and make a few more turns, so that they can pass through the thin mesentery, without puncturing the intestines or blood vessels. It's grinding and grinding, it's not pleasant at all, Grand Duke Rimmel groaned as he closed his eyes. Suddenly he shouted again. Hey, don't touch there. That's where I store my power. Gretel, rightward arrow. Rightward arrow. Wait, you store your power in your appendix. No wonder the results of CT and MRI scans are so strange. It turns out that this is the feeling of a large amount of energy condensation, which is somewhat similar to the crystal core in the body of Warcraft, but not the same. Maybe, this is the negative energy crystal of undead creatures. Next time, you should find the necromancer and ask for more of their death knights, zombies, and various undead creatures. Scan them carefully and accumulate the numbers. Gretel endured the complaints and carefully guided the vines to the location of the abnormal image. The tip of the vine, the front thorn, turns into a long hollow needle, which is incorporated into the target cell and closed. Great, pull out. By the way, it is impossible to take any more samples during the withdrawal process, but it is natural for the vines to become rougher and naturally pick up some cell tissue. The vine, the sample contained in the vine, was held by Gretel in both hands and flew away. Naturally, he sliced the samples he took and observed them under the microscope himself. The cells and tissues attached to the vines were carefully divided into 10 parts, and were held cherished by the necromancers under various instruments. Negative energy. Hurry. See if these cells can divide and grow under the infiltration of negative energy. Moonlight. Where's the moonlight? Has the plastic energy department done the analysis? Has the wavelength been made? You also need to use healing spells appropriately. Natural healing spells, maybe the positive energy is not so strong. It's a pity that no one is present at the God of War Temple and the Spring Water Temple, so we can't test the effects of different types of healing spells. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1814. Seam. There are cancer cells, but the number of cancer cells is not large, and the tumor is not large. This cannot be judged. The reason why it has been difficult to progress over the years is because the tumor absorbs too many nutrients. Gretel and Grand Duke Rimmer sat face to face, telling each other one by one about tissue sections, pathology, comparison of normal cells and cancer cells, films, and measurement results. The Grand Duke listened extremely attentively, but judging from his tightly furrowed brows, it was obvious that he was having a hard time accepting this new knowledge. It's not that I can't understand it, but it's probably the same as drinking blood directly or chewing hard-pressed blood tofu that has been stored for more than 10 years. Then, can we at least get rid of these cancer cells first? The Grand Duke digested Gretel's statement with great difficulty, and finally managed to clarify his thoughts. Is there a tumor? Yes, it is. Is it serious? It's not serious. Master Nordmark even made a comment during the explanation. Normally, if it were a human being, this tumor would never survive this long, it would take up a huge amount of space, have multiple metastases, and have various malignant transformations. Maybe it's because we became a vampire that the tumor wouldn't grow big. Actually, what you really want to say is, maybe it's because he died, right? After all, the growth of dead people, if they can really grow, is still very, very slow, so slow that they barely grow at all. In fact, tumors require a rich blood supply to supply nutrients to the tumor body. Many tumors may even form additional proliferating blood vessels to steal nutrients from the body. And what about the vampires? How much blood does a vampire have? Ordinary blood, the blood that is drunk into the stomach, is of little use, and the true blood that is rich in power, in the words of the Grand Duke. You can't even control your own blood, so you still have the nerve to say you're a vampire. If it is well controlled, the tumor will naturally not grow big. If it is not well controlled, it will not go far at all. What is the value of such a vampire? However, just because you can control it and prevent it from growing up doesn't mean that it won't have any impact on your body. Especially after reading the article published by Master Nordmark, the Grand Duke felt that something was wrong with himself. This thing usually doesn't show up, but in strong battles and when I push my limits, something doesn't always feel right. I always feel like something is dragging me down, something is blocking me, engulfing me. Don't let me take a step forward. Not only that. These dark things always give him a feeling of terror. If they are allowed to grow and if they are not controlled when they hit their limits, terrible things will happen. It is very likely that the one who will advance and become a legend by then will not be himself, but God knows what. It must be killed. We must kill them all. In the perception of Grand Duke Rimmer, this thing is a very large piece in the intestines, also in the liver, and in many places throughout the body, dotted and very subtle. It's very small now, but when they grow up, it will be a big thing. It's not easy to kill. Greet looked embarrassed. I tried the tissue taken out immediately. The targeted killing of cancer cells did not respond well to the cancer cells in your body. It can be said that it cannot be killed at all, maybe because of the special characteristics of undead creatures. Not only could it not be killed, but the cancer cells removed by several targeted killing techniques began to divide and grow, as if adding fuel to the fire. Greet suspected that the principle of this targeted killing technique may be to induce negative energy and directly kill cells. However, the cells of undead creatures are already soaked with negative energy. Killing them in this way will instead supply energy to them. However, Gretel was unable to change the model of this spell so that it could be applied to undead creatures. He had no choice but to abandon the task and let the necromancer and nature priests work together to find a way to make a workable thing. As for direct surgery, if you can accept that we will disembowel you directly and cut off all the suspicious things, and then you can drink your blood and sunbathe in the moon to heal yourself, then it is not impossible to consider. However, such an operation may not be very clean, and there is a possibility of recurrence, and we recommend that you undergo anesthesia. Otherwise, you will feel like you are being cut open and the inside of your body is being turned over when you are awake. You have no control. If the control is not good, once the power breaks out, it will not be good for the patient himself, and the doctor may also be killed or injured. This is a risk that doctors in this world have to bear more than in previous lives. Doctors in previous lives would never jump up and break the doctor's head in the middle of the operation as long as the patient was anesthetized and tied up, right? The Grand Duke struggled for a long time, and finally nodded with difficulty, agreeing with Gretel's statement. Okay, I'll wait. Wait until you get the results of your research before you perform surgery on me. By the way, Do you really think that if these things are removed, I can become a legend? Then how can I guarantee it? Gretel jumped up on the spot. Legend, legend. That's a legend. Anyone in the world, no, any intelligent creature, from a giant dragon at the third level of the legend to any mage, priest, or warrior at the first level of the legend, go and ask if there is anyone who can guarantee to help. People advance to legend. Even the glorious Holy See, the infusion of divine grace from the glorious Holy See, and the papal crown, it is said, can only enable the legendary primary level pope to exert the power of the legendary third level divine descending technique at the cost of his lifespan. However, as soon as the crown is taken off, it immediately returns to its original shape. If you want to elevate a non-legendary to the legendary level, just dream. A half-step legend, burning all the body, life, and soul, launching a legendary attack, and then disappearing into ashes, leaving nothing behind. You ask me to promise, but I can't even promise myself. Okay, no guarantee, no need for your guarantee. Grand Duke Rimmel also knew that he had made a mistake and quickly reassured. What I mean is that when I activate the ultimate power, I feel that the power will be sucked away by those strange places, which makes me feel very dangerous. Can you mark all these places for me and then cut them out? Gretel. CT. NMR. Theoretically, it is not difficult to do a CT scan and mark out the energy abnormalities within the body. The problem is, I don't know if the CT machine can hold up. The CT machine in the previous life was not strong enough to support a fat man weighing 300 to 400 pounds. It would not be able to support a humanoid Gundam punching and kicking inside. It's not that difficult to open a hospital in another world, right? Author, Geolan 2020. Chapter 1815. The legendary equipment that is the core of the magic light source has sufficient strength. As long as the Grand Duke can restrain himself, stop punching and kicking, and attack with all his strength, a piece of legendary equipment will not be easily damaged. However, as a receiving device, yes, after many iterations, the magicians have developed a mature receiving device. The huge flat plate is fragile and cannot withstand the full power of the Grand Duke. Not only could he not withstand the explosion, he could not even withstand the aftermath of the power that came out when the Grand Duke tried his best to increase his power. Moreover, that tablet cannot distinguish the difference between the power stimulated by the magic light source by detection magic and the power dissipated from the Grand Duke. Otherwise, how many more times should we scan? Greet looked troubled. You scanned once in a quiet state, and then scanned again after increasing the power? Let's compare the difference between the two. Compare, after increasing the power, which places are not where you store the power, but you forcibly absorb the power. If the scan is inaccurate and the research is too slow, won't I die? After much deliberation, Grand Duke Rimmer sternly refused. It would be better to be slower, he thought, it would be better to be slower. Take your time, and wait for these magicians to find a suitable solution. Anyway, he has been waiting for 80 years or 100 years, so he should wait for a few more years. Moreover, the magicians in the Mage Tower are working hard on research, aren't they? The spectra of moonlight and sunlight, I have checked the data before. Not many people have measured this. The data is very old, and the methods and instruments used are very old. I suggest that we measure it ourselves. That's right, test it yourself. Look, this attitude is very satisfying. Therefore, the Grand Duke did not rush, and watched quietly, waiting for these energy evocation mages to be busy and work hard to report. The spectrum of moonlight and sunlight are mainly different in the ultraviolet content. Moonlight contains much less ultraviolet rays than sunlight. But, is it possible that the moonlight itself is much weaker than the sunlight? Can we apply for something to collect moonlight and see if the concentrated moonlight has the same spectrum as the sun? What are you applying for? Lenses. Reflectors. Or the Grand Duke himself. If you want to apply for the Grand Duke himself, you can find a way. I won't ask for it. It's over budget. Help, the moonlight condensed by the Grand Duke has different spectral peaks than the moonlight we measured. I don't mean that its intensity is different, its peak position is different, and some places are not what they should be. So do we really need to ask the Grand Duke for advice? By the way, the negative energy and moonlight energy need to be measured again, the spectrum and characteristic peaks must all be measured. Why do the vampires think that moonlight is more useful to them than negative energy? Help. We are the energy evocation system, we are not necromancers. Why do we need to deal with negative energy? Is negative energy not energy? Why is negative energy not energy? You should broaden your horizons and don't set limits for yourself. You reminded me that I want to apply for an experiment to hit atoms with negative energy and see what can be produced. Maybe, I can produce particles that I have never seen before, then I will publish them. The topic gradually went to a place that Grand Duke Rumor didn't quite understand. However, as long as these magicians are working hard and doing research for him, the Grand Duke doesn't care much about what they are doing, and is even willing to cooperate with the experiment. Ask me to help condense another ball of moonlight. Is this cup of Warcraft blood a reward? No problem. Come on, continue. Can you please help me try the effects of negative energy and moonlight on healing? Make a small cut on your hand, and then shine it on the negative energy, or shine it on the moonlight, and observe the healing speed and results. No, this little monster blood is not enough. Ah, it's great to have enough Warcraft blood. During this period of time, I was dealing with a rabbit that had no strength at all. I was torturing the rabbit's blood until I almost vomited. Rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. As a mature medical research institution, rabbits are absolutely indispensable. Moreover, after several large-scale transfers of laboratories, Greet also has sufficient experience in how to quickly set up a rabbit breeding center. The Grand Duke of Rumor became a victim of this experience. Rows of rabbit cages, rows of rabbits, were picked up, handled and inspected one by one. A magician stirred and stirred in the test tube, stirred, and then sucked some slightly coagulated blood and injected it into the rabbit's blood vessels. This method of creating thrombi is not very good. Emboli vary in size and appear in two random locations. Another method. Inject something else. For example, pig serum. Cow serum, the necromancers whispered to each other and discussed in low voices. I remember in class, we learned that different types of serum injections can cause blood coagulation. Or a magic potion. Is there any magic potion that can create blood clots and simulate human cerebral infarction in animals? For magic potions, be careful that the magic reaction is for the magic potion, not the blood clot. Then, the rabbit with a blood clot was sent to the Grand Duke after undergoing magnetic resonance and analyzing the location of the blood clot. The Grand Duke stood in front of these rabbits, closed his eyes, frowned, and felt the blood clots in the rabbits' bodies. Thrombolysis. A thin red light fell, covering the rabbit's entire head. The rabbit trembled, suddenly raised its head, made a sharp cry, and limped twice in the rabbit cage. One hand immediately grabbed the rabbit, held it as if it were a treasure, and flew towards the magnetic resonance center upstairs. At the same time, a sleep spell quietly fell on the rabbit. Thrombolysis of cerebral thrombosis was successful. The thrombolytic magic did not affect the blood clots in the rabbit's legs. Range accuracy has improved. Half an hour later, the necromancer in black robes carried the rabbit and flew down. Raising his hand, a cloud of light and shadow was cast on the ceiling, outlining the dense blood vessels in the rabbit's brain and body. However, it would be nice if the accuracy could be higher. Fresh bleeding occurred near the thrombolysis site, indicating that this thrombolysis spell will still reduce the degree of coagulation and increase the probability of bleeding. Your Majesty the Grand Duke, Are you really unable to provide the spell model? As long as you provide the spell model, we can make targeted modifications and targeted positioning. Grand Duke Rimmer gave him a glare. These are the innate spells of the vampires, which can be found through telekinesis. With a little bit of talent and repeated practice, you can use them skillfully. Spell model? Don't say that no one will summarize it. Even if you summarize it, can you just give it to others? It doesn't work. If it doesn't work, please try a few more times and let's test the spell fluctuations. It should be okay. How long will it take me to smell rabbit blood? I almost vomited from the smell.